Just waiting for participants to join. I can see people coming on now. We'll just wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started.
Are you able to reach Beverly? Surprised her video is not on.
Beverly, we can't hear you.
Oh.
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh. Oh, okay. I can see her now. Sorry, I couldn't see you before. Now I think it was from my side. I can see you now. Sorry.
Now?
Yeah, and I can hear you well.
You can hear. Okay, I better take
Okay.
these out now. It's just the background noise is a bit.
Okay. I think we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ibu Kwanabi, and as chair of the British Nigeria Law Firm's Business Law Network, I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to this panel discussion today. The topic of our panel discussion today is how will artificial intelligence impact the practice of law? I will be moderating what promises to be an interesting discussion on this topic with our esteemed panelists, who I will now take this opportunity to welcome and introduce. Our first panelist is Ngozi Aderibigbe. Ngozi is a partner and head of the Intellectual Property Department at Jackson Etti Edu, a leading full-service law firm in Nigeria. She's a thought She's a thought leader in the field of IP and technology and has contributed commentaries and articles on platforms such as Thomas Reuters, Law Business Research UK, and the Intellectual Comparative Legal Guides UK. She was a keynote speaker at Techpoint Africa, and she spoke on the future of artificial intelligence and intellectual property rights. And in 2022, moderated a panel session on artificial intelligence inventorship during the World Intellectual Property Organization Conversation on Intellectual Property and Frontier Technologies. Ngozi is the chairperson of the Intellectual Property Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association on Business Law. Our next panelist is Shobna Aya. Shobna is an experienced barrister and arbitrator. She's presently the co-vice chair of the Legal Services Committee of the Bar Council of England and Wales and sits on the Bar Council's IT panel. playing an active role in engaging with implementation of IT developments, data protection and security, and AI on behalf of the Bar Council. As a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and a committee member of its London branch, she frequently deals with the impact of emerging technologies in dispute resolution. In addition to the uses and implications of legal tech and fintech services, Shobna is a leader in addressing the legal issues and regulation of emerging technologies, from artificial intelligence to crypto assets, DAOs, and metaverse, which provide added legal challenges and opportunities. Beverly Agbakuba is our next panelist. Beverly is a partner and the head of sports, entertainment, and technology at Olisa Agbakuba Legal, OAL. She has extensive experience working with tech startups and startup accelerators and incubators, including Founders Institute Lagos, Nigeria. At OAL, she led the Startup Incubator Program. She is also active in tech-related professional associations such as Stakeholders in Blockchain Association of Nigeria and Innovation Support Network. Finally, we have Alice Chanaka. Alice is the Senior Director of Business Development at TransPerfect Legal Solutions, TLS. TLS is an industry leader in global legal support, offering a full suite of services, including forensic technology and consulting, e-discovery, and early data assessment, among other things. With offices in over 100 cities across 6 continents, TLS is a trusted partner for every AmLaw 200 and Global 100 law firm, as well as the majority of Fortune 500 corporate legal departments. We're very pleased to have you all on this panel, and I, for one, cannot wait to hear from you on this very interesting topic. For the audience, please do put your questions forward using the Q&A button on your screen, and the panel will be invited to answer these later on. To start us off on this discussion, can I come first to you, Alice? Can you tell us, what is artificial intelligence? How is it distinct from other types of technology we may have come across?
Yeah, absolutely. So artificial intelligence, by its definition, is the simulation of human processes via computers. And traditionally, that was seen in a few different ways. So you had face recognition, the like of, or computer vision, which we now see as face recognition, that has led on to driverless cars, etc. Speech recognition, so that's Siri, Alexa, but we're now seeing moving into the space of speech to text, so automated transcription, subtitling, and things like that. And natural language processing, which historically has been machine translation, machine language-based things, but that's the technology that powers now legal technology like contract review and e-discovery review tools, which we can go into more detail. I think to answer the other question, so how do we distinguish it? AI compared to standard legal technology requires large training sets, so large data sets. In order for Siri or Alexa to adequately recognize speech and respond to it, it needed a lot of speech recordings to analyze and learn from. So in the legal field, we have tons of technology at our fingertips, especially since COVID, and I would categorize them as needing those large data sets or not. So things like video and audio conferencing services that are now used for hearings, that's a fantastic development, as is e-bundling. These are tools that I highly recommend for lawyers, but they don't classify as AI because they are technology that is designed for a specific purpose. When we're getting into AI, we're looking at technology that needs its large training sets. So one thing that I deal with on a daily basis now is technology-assisted review. So where computers learn from the decisions that lawyers are making on specific documents in order to do a number of different things. That might be to go and complete the work of the lawyer, for the lawyer to go and quality control check, or if you're reviewing documents, say, and looking for documents that you find interesting in the course of an investigation or dispute, the computer learns from your decision in order to bring you back more documents that you find interesting.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks, Alice. I mean, I know that was a very broad question, but it's certainly one that a lot of us as lawyers have been grappling with, seeing all that's been going on the internet at the moment around AI. I'm going to come to you, Ngozi, on the same question as well, just to see whether you might be able to come to it at a different angle for us.
Thank you. I think Alice has done a great job of, mapping out the in a sense, I would say the scope of uses and the ways AI is considered. Let me just give a basic definition, and I'll just draw from the words, two words that we're all familiar with: artificial and intelligence. So artificial means man-made, well, something that is not natural. And intelligence simply means the ability to think, particularly think creatively. And that's something that traditionally we have said to be, well, animals think, but only humans can think creatively. And what artificial intelligence really is training computer systems to be able to think and do things like humans would usually do. And Alice did mention that it requires a lot of analysis, analyzing a lot of data sets, and that's really true. There are three main things that computer systems that are considered to be artificial intelligence systems do. Number one is learning, and they learn from the data sets, a large chunk of data sets that they're fed with continually. They're also able to draw learnings from these data sets and get on a path of self-learning, and from the learnings they have, they improve their output. And that's really what makes artificial intelligence really different and really unique, because you don't have to program an update. In that sense, the computer is able to learn from its experiences and from the data that it constantly processes and improve itself. And of course, it can self-correct. These are very unique features of artificial intelligence. And in the way that it's, how is it different from other technology? I think Alice has made very good points on that. I'll just add to what she said. The fact that the output you get with artificial intelligence is often not human-driven, for the reason that I have just explained, because this is a computer set that has learned to consume a lot of data, analyze it in a way that no human can possibly do, and to use those learnings to also to create outcomes. So you would find that with artificial intelligence systems, you can get improved outcomes each time, and it's not a human being behind the screen trying to improve and trying to, reconfigure things. I would also say, from a legal standpoint, one of the things that stand this particular technology out from others is that it raises several other legal issues, right? Like no other technology has. And that's, for us as lawyers, that's something that would always catch our interest. Whether you think about it from intellectual property issues that come with it, or even issues around how we perceive some of our hallowed notions of law. Artificial intelligence, because it mimics a human ability to think cognitively, it then creates questions around issues of laws that were tied down and we thought were settled. Today, those issues are now being disrupted by artificial intelligence. I think that's another thing that makes it really different.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And there's so much to think about and unpack there. We'll try to do our best to get further into some of those things as we go on. But from what you've both said, it sounds like, and I'm sure if we hadn't realized that before, we now do, that artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time. So why is it such a hot topic at the moment? What's new about it? I'm going to come to Shabna and later on Beverly on this one.
No, thank you. And thank you for inviting me on this. As Ngozi and Alice have said, artificial intelligence is a very wide branch of computer science. It's designed to perform in ways that mimic human intelligence. And I emphasize mimic. It is not human intelligence, not at this stage anyway. But this is why I think a lot of it's been a bit overwhelming. And what has been the kind of leapfrog, I think, recently is principally in this range of machine learning, but machine learning to a different level altogether, which is generative artificial intelligence. We were relying principally previously on predictive artificial intelligence, and I think predictive artificial intelligence is still going to be a major factor. So let me just try and explain the slightly differences between them. So generative AI is used to attempt to create new content on probability. So it uses vast amount of data and it takes a probability of those in different kind of programming, if I put it in most simple terms, in order to create what the next word or how to create something else. So that's how it does it. Whereas beforehand, predictive was principally a lot more in terms of what was actually programmed into the computer were specific kind of tasks, such as image classification or sentiment analysis or speak recognition. And predictive was used to was kind of used for labeling data. So training predictive AI models typically requires a data set with labeled examples, which were input into the programming system. And that's how we've been using a lot of predictive AI, and it's done amazing jobs. It's been there for several years now, where we had contract reviews, especially insurance contract reviews, the way you do e-discovery on especially in the common law jurisdictions, where we have to go and try and identify between a legally professional, legally privileged document compared to and what's relevant and what's not irrelevant from all the documents that you have. So all these kind of predictive technologies have been there, but we've had this kind of leapfrog into generative AI, where it kind of tries to generate new content on the kind of probability. So it does deep machine learning. It's unsupervised machine learning in the sense that it self-learns in essence from the information it does. So if I just explain quickly about, I think what the headlines of what everybody's been going on about is about ChatGPT and how wonderful that's been, and some people have been considering it as about kind of overwhelming in that field. So if we just look and think about, first of all, what is it? First of all, it is what we call a large language model. Let me try and explain what it is not. It is not a sci-fi robot. It does not think for itself. And it's not about to take the world, all right? It is a very sophisticated version of a sort of a predictive analysis of generative AI systems. And it's it's in a way that it's been developed so that if you look at it, we've been using this kind of format for quite some time now. If you look at your iPhone or in any kind of phone, and you look for text creation, so if you start typing in something in a messenger, you'll find that it starts to try and predict the next word that comes up. And that's essentially what it is in essence. It's that kind of auto aggression sort of model where it tries to predict the next word that comes along. And it's been very well done, because what happens, it's been created with a vast amount of parameters and a vast amount of data. I think it's like 1.5 million gigs of data that it's been actually used in order to program this chat GPT. That's version 3.5. And you got to also know that that's from anything that's from the internet from 2021. So I think that's why we've been having this rage of suddenly everything's in the news about chat GPT and what it does. And anybody who's used it would probably think, oh, wow, what is this? Is it really thinking about me? But it is not a human model. It is not thinking. It is actually programmed in such a way that it pulls everything from what it knows from the databases, from the internet, the programming that it's been given, the training that it's given on how to predict things. And it tries to predict the next word in the sequence according to what was previously done. And that's the beauty of it. It can create things now. And that's what generative AI is doing, is creating in the sense of pulling everything from previous information. So it's not original kind of real thinking as what a human would do. And you can see that when we talk about the problems that this causes.
Thanks so much for that, Shobna. Really appreciate the sort of not just covering what's new generally, but also the sort of more sort of eye-catching, headline items like ChatGPT. I come to you now, Beverly. Just wondered whether there were any other parts of that you wanted to explore a bit more.
Thank you, Bukun, and thanks for having my co-panelists have done a fantastic job introducing the topic. I think maybe I could just lean quickly over what are the fears. And I really love how Shobana said, it's not about to take over the world. It's likely not to take your job either. One thing I feel like us lawyers should be looking to is the future of work. The way we work has drastically changed since COVID, that is sure. There's a lot of beauty and there's a lot of advantages you can get from working with generative AI. Namely, we've talked about the e-discovery, we've talked about predictability of case management. Is your case likely to win or lose? But let's not lose the big picture. It like Shobana said, it doesn't replace original thinking. It doesn't replace original content because it still needs to feed off something. So I tend to see generative AI as a way of supercharging the way I work as a lawyer. And I think that kind of leads me on to the point that perhaps maybe the way lawyers work and maybe our outlook on the industry needs to change a bit. Many of us, maybe I'm speaking for myself, the way we were taught at law school, very conventional, very sort of manual and analog. And stepping into the future, or the future is already here, and there are these tools at our disposal, and it's a function of how are we making use of generative AI in a way that is safe and in a way that is ethical. Ethics really come into play when we talk about generative AI, and of also the use of data. You really can't get away from how is data being used, mined. Let's talk about proprietary data. My co-panelists have already laid the foundation for how the data is actually input. So it has to feed off something. Now, we as lawyers, if we are putting in proprietary data into these apps, then there's a really massive potential of data breach. There's a massive potential to have infringement, etc. I think Ngozi also alluded to that. These IP rights issues are popping up everywhere. We see issues around even songwriters, composers. I saw a litigation the other day. Some authors are suing some of these apps because they believe that their material was used to feed these apps. So it's throwing up a lot of issues that I think the legal profession, lawyers, counsel like ourselves need to be aware of, because it just helps us advise our clients a bit better, and also what are the traps to look out for, especially clients of ours that work in tech. So many people are building apps these days, so founders, entrepreneurs, how can we adequately advise them of the pitfalls? So that's kind of my take on the conversation so far.
Thanks so much, Beverly. You touched on a good few cogent points there, and one of them reminded me of a phrase I'd seen somewhere where someone said, lawyers will not be replaced by tech, but they will be replaced by lawyers who keep up with tech. So, I mean, that, if nothing else, makes this conversation so pertinent. And just to explore that a little bit more, we've touched on some of the areas that make this particular topic very relevant for lawyers, IP issues, ethical issues. Ngozi, I'm going to come to you again. Are there any other areas we need to be thinking about as lawyers? Is it relevant for lawyers as a whole, or is this a tech lawyer thing?
I think lawyers are first human beings. We live in a real world. The world is changing, and we're not going to be immune from the changes that are happening before our eyes. And there's still a lot to come. Whatever we have seen is nothing compared to what we'll see in the next 5 years. So first of all, lawyers must realize that they cannot distance themselves from the realities of today's world. That's the beginning point. And I think this is really important because I have found that technology developments are actually layered. So you need to know one to understand the next, kind of. And if you put yourself in a place where you're not disturbed, you don't want to know what's happening there, you would have to come face to face with the reality someday that you can't do anything without the technology and you don't have the skills for it. Many of the tech skills we've acquired in recent times were not acquired by formal education. They were acquired by interacting with technology, just being fond of technology, and you just get to know your way around it. And so for lawyers, this is not something we can shy away from. It's often said that the legal industry is very conservative and very slow to change. Well, that is changing in itself, which shows you that technology is also capable of changing. To Beverly's point, since 2020, when COVID set in full force, we have all changed in 3 or 4 short years. And we thought this could never happen. Well, there's more that might happen. So for lawyers, we need to have an open mind towards this. I also think that it's important for lawyers to realize that we have an important role to play, because artificial intelligence is changing the basics of legal principles, right? The basic theories that we've always understood. And now there's so much, things are shifting, and lawyers need to be part of the conversation to redefine what these rules have to be. Today, we're talking about regulations for development of artificial intelligence. Lawyers need to be in the room to have that conversation. And you can't have that conversation if you don't even understand it. So it's not a side thing. Our role as enablers of social conduct, or the rules that guide social conduct, will still needs to drive us to understand what's happening in the artificial intelligence space, so that we can begin to make our input. Let me also talk about the fact that even our clients' needs will change. If we don't change, your clients are not going to come to you with the same kind of contractual issues that they had 10 years ago. Technology is going to change how they do business. It's going to change the nature of issues that come up. It's going to change, the complexities of the issues and legal issues that lawyers will have to deal with. Will bring them close to understanding AI, or at least understanding how new technologies work. And then let's talk about the work that lawyers do themselves. That too will change. We're already seeing that it's changing, but it will change because, like, I really love that quote you gave, that lawyers will be replaced. Lawyers who do not embrace artificial intelligence will be replaced by lawyers who do, and that's the truth. Better efficiency. We're talking about clients are a lot more conscious about fees now, because they know they have options. Lawyers who are able to deploy technology to create better efficiency would definitely win the day. Lawyers who are able to provide better quality of legal service delivery will definitely win the day. So we must think of artificial intelligence from different lights. It's the new reality. We need to just get into the game and not just be on the sidelines, but actually be part of the conversation and push things forward, because it is going to help us. Otherwise, we'll become victims of this progress that is really a welcome progress.
So many things in there, and thank you so much for that. I'm also then going to go to Shobna. I know, not only is this impacting our lawyers' work, and as Ngozi said, you basically don't want to be left behind. You want to keep up with things so you can serve your clients better. But you've also been thinking about these issues at the Bar Council of England and Wales. And I think you're obviously involved in some of the work of the panel on that. Did you want to add anything to what Ngozi said?
I mean, I agree totally with what Ngozi has said. I mean, at the end of the day, I think as lawyers, we support society. I mean, it's one of the things I always tell my law students as well. When you're looking to areas of, where should I practice? What should I practice? First of all, I ask them, which area of society do you really want to support? And if you look at it now, technology is just moving everywhere. All right. You mentioned, you think about one area which technology is not being used in. I'm afraid it's being used everywhere. So I think we're naturally going to be embedding. If I look at my younger law students, I think to them, it's easy to get onto the web, to do anything, to do they're being brought up in the sense of using a lot of technology. And I think our upcoming lawyers of the future will be in that area, that they will know about technology and how to deal with it. But what we have to really look at is to keep checking up and see how we're progressing and how we're progressing with it ethically. Because I think as lawyers, we need to always look at what the rule of law is and how do we protect it and how do we maintain our integrity in these kind of areas. So they're kind of very strong areas. Now, I think I'll just also address what I think one of the questions was about the New York lawyer as well in there. Now, going back to that chat GPT kind of function, I mean, one of the mentions I told you was the fact that you really try, when you're looking at any kind of technologies, one of the things to try and find out is how does it really work? You can always question and try and find out what is the programming behind it. How does it really work? You don't have to go into learning the program itself, but you really have to know how the system sort of works. Why does it create that sort of outcome, and to verify it, etc. And how is it being verified by your peers in using that kind of technology. So if we look at ChatGPT, which is a generative, as I said, large language model kind of process, where it looks at all these different words and creates the possibility of a new word that follows on from that sentence based on the previous words in terms of probability, etc. You can see that it doesn't have any concept of the truth or accuracy that strives from each of these possibilities. It just strives from plausibility. Generative large language models, therefore, are kind of prone to what even ChatGPT describes itself as hallucinations, a term that describes a phenomena where the output generated by these LLM models may sound plausible, but are either factually incorrect or unrelated to the given context. So if we look at, there have been lots of examples that have been created here where the ability of ChatGPT inadvertently to generate misinformation and fake news is a serious issue of which you have to be aware of as a lawyer before you're using any of these programs. I mean, you'll probably be using much more in the future. You'll probably be using more of these large language models, which will be able to be a lot more better, because as you know, this is like a beta type. The ChatGPT that's been put on OpenAI is just there for experimental use at the moment. So they are actually experimenting on this. And I know very well, for example, the Portuguese government is using a closed format of this, where the prompts that you put in, because depending on the prompts, you get different versions of the answer as well. So the input as well makes a big difference. But with regard to the fake news, it's kind of, when you consider that practically 62% of the information on the internet is considered to be fake news by certain researchers, you can just imagine what GPT can create these hallucinations. So you probably heard about the New York case, where wonderful, this was around in June 2023, I think, where 2 lawyers were sanctioned because they had previously used information. Well, 2 attorneys, Stephen Schwartz and Peter Loduker, I think, of the law firm Levdo and Oberman, and they're now wonderfully infamous for this, who allegedly have been allegedly sanctioned for acting in bad faith, for making acts of conscious avoidance and false and misleading statements to the court. You might say, why? Well, this was due to the fact that they had asked ChatGPT in their case of Malta versus Abilene, and I'll put the link up in the chat in a few minutes, where you can read the sanctions on it. But there's a full history to this, where actually the lawyers used ChatGPT to try and find out and say, can you find me some cases on blah, blah, blah. ChatGPT obviously went around the internet, created these 6 wonderful cases. So it can create things, yes, wonderfully create things. And out of those 6 cases, they were completely all non-existent in the sense that they didn't tally. There were real case numbers and names, but they didn't go according to the jurisprudence or anything in the way it wanted. And this lawyer went and asked ChatGPT, well, are these real cases? ChatGPT went and said, yes, they are real cases, because yes, they are real case numbers, and he, without checking them up, even with the normal databases, put them into his affidavits and his court submissions. And it was only when the judge wanted to find out about that did it come out to fruition that he was using ChatGPT. And of course, that was in New York, more closer to my home here in Manchester, UK. So coming back to UK, I know very well a litigated person attempted to use ChatGPT to try and find out some citations in one of his cases. So I think in one of the cases before, the day before, on the first day of the hearing, I think the barrister challenged and said, well, there is no authority for that case. So I think the litigated person went back, asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT created this wonderful case. The litigated person tried to use that, and of course, when on further prompting, it was found out that he did use ChatGPT to find out this case, which didn't exist, and that was also a consideration. But more worse than that, you might know about the case of Jonathan Turley, a law professor from George Washington University, was falsely accused by ChatGPT of sexually harassing students on a trip he never took, while working in a school which he was never taught, and citing non-existent report from a Washington Post. So you've got to be really careful about how this information is actually created and done. And there are lots more stories that have come up that how ChatGPT and these large language models can actually create false or misinformation, and its ability to hallucinate or be fooled, the poor thing. You've got to really consider this at the moment. If you're using something like ChatGPT, test it out, check it out on something that just play around with it, I would say. So you actually learn about the technology, you know how its sort of system works, what it's doing. Don't get overwhelmed by it. And I think, as Beverly mentioned, one of the most important things is make sure you don't put anything in the prompts into these open systems like OpenAI, etc., which have got legal professional privilege in them, any kind of trade secrets, any of the IP areas, or anything to try and identify any personal data, because that will be shared among the all internet, because they are allowed. If you look at the terms and conditions, and that's one of the most important things you should be doing as a lawyer when you're using any of these AI things, look at the terms of service. You will find that they can own and use anything that's put in there and created. So your IP is not protected if you go and put it into ChatGPT.
Many thanks for that, Shobna. You covered some additional things on what Ngozi spoke to there, but also then very helpfully answered what the question that's come through and the question and answer here. I don't think the rest of the audience will be able to see it, so I'll just read it out for context. So we had a question: is anyone in the panel aware of the lawyer in the USA who used AI to do his brief, and it was all wrong? Comments about the use here would be interesting. I think that has been answered to a T, so thank you so much for that. I'm going to come to Alice in this question as well. I think you had a couple more things to add.
Yeah, just to round out the impact on AI on the legal profession, I think we're quite nascent. So we're now seeing the start of the impact of AI on law. But I can very quickly speak to the impact of AI on the translation industry, because neural language processing was one of the first iterations of AI. And I've worked at TransPerfect for 11 years. We've done translations of some of our bread and butter services. And from day one, I was asked, does Google Translate pose an existential threat to your business? And I'm still asked that question now. And what I can say is no, because the translators who could see into the future and were willing to embrace change upskilled. And they upskilled to work with machine translation, to what Beverly said, to supercharge their work. So now the translation industry, whether you know it or not, is AI powered. We use machine translation first and foremost for all language-based projects, with professional linguists coming in to post-edit the machine translation to bring it up to a professional judge approved quality. And I do think that there's a lot of inferences that we can draw to the legal industry here. The translators who upskilled and embraced change are the ones that are really reaping the rewards now. They've upskilled, they understand the computer science, they're willing to work with it and improve it. And what that means is that they can get through more content. We're able to deliver a service to our clients that's way more efficient. And in the context of translation, that means that the average consumer is able to better communicate with one another. And that's no bad thing. And in the legal industry, we have to be asking the question, yes, what impact will AI have on the legal industry, but what impact will it have on our clients? And that should be greater efficiencies, like greater access to justice. So if we see lawyers upskilling with technology like we have seen in the translation industry to supercharge their work, they're not going to lose their jobs. They're not going to lose anything. In fact, they're going to be at a more competitive edge. We've already seen this in the London legal market, that boutique firms, smaller firms are able to take on much larger instructions from clients and compete with the Magic Circle or the Silver Circle firms where they never were able to because they're using AI. And the use of AI is court sanctioned. It is absolutely court approved as long as there are professional subject matter experts handling it. The same way in that translations, a judge doesn't care if the translation came from a machine as long as a professional linguist has signed off on it. So it's the way you get from A to B doesn't necessarily matter. It's just that B is of a legally sound and proper instance. So I just think that that's a good example for how the impact can be an overwhelming positive one.
Thank you so much for that, Alice. And of course, many of us as lawyers have had to rely on services such as that provided by TransPerfect in terms of language translation work for our matters. So it's helpful to just be reminded and as to why, you know, we do that rather than literally sort of just Google Translate a document and hope for the best. So we've touched on some of the very key points already, you know, under the other questions we've covered. The key points being, what impact do you think AI will have on legal practice going forward? What, if any, are the pitfalls for lawyers? I mean, we've had some very, very good food for thought on that. I just wondered whether any of the panelists wanted to add anything on those two subjects before we move on.
I would just, again, just bouncing off what has been said generally, I think some key takeaways should be, it's time to upskill. You know, the legal industry is a dynamic one, in as much as we are subject matter experts. We're always learning. AI is evolving just as the law is evolving. And I like to see AI and the legal industry as this sort of marriage, you know, and the more you kind of accept it, you learn about it, it doesn't mean that it's a complete replacement for subject matter expertise. And I really like that has been made very clear. It doesn't take away subject matter expertise, rather it amplifies your expertise. So I'll give you an example. I speak French. I'm probably the only French speaker in the office. But I did say to one of the associates that, you know, maybe you could have a go replying the client because the client doesn't speak English. And, you know, she used the AI generative tool to send a fantastic, you know, sometimes it gets a bit iffy because it doesn't translate properly. But just like Alice said, even they are working with the experts to constantly refine and tune up the service. So it was fantastic to see an associate who doesn't know any French able to, you know, send back a perfect response to a client in another language. So look at how it's bridging gaps between communities, breaking down language barriers. So for me, and I'm hoping people take this away, that, you know, AI will hopefully bridge a lot of gaps, but it doesn't mean that you rest on your oars. You really do need to go out there and upskill. If you're into content, if you're a writer, you need to keep up, you know, upping your skills, so to speak. So that's kind of the way I see AI, as a tool to enhance my productivity and my efficiency. But all the principles around the way we work as lawyers still apply. You must be ethical. You must do your due diligence. You don't go running an AI report and you just take it as gospel. You still need to make sure you do your due diligence. So that's what I wanted to add to the conversation so far.
Thank
I
you.
think Beverly just added it beautifully over there, actually, because it essentially is a tool that you're using. And just as you wouldn't, I know there were some people have described ChatGPT as being equivalent to a first-year law student, but I think it's even more junior than that, frankly. If you want to play around with something like that, you think about it as if it's something like an intern from high school or whatever, just trying to help you out on something. You wouldn't go and put that into court. You have to maintain your integrity on that. And we have to embrace the change. And there are certain bits of the technology that we know very well works better and efficiently. And it's been being, as Alice has said, the transcription area, and also in areas such as like predicting the likelihood of a patent application to actually succeed in a particular jurisdiction. It can pull out and find out things. That's mainly done a lot with predictive analytics. But there's that. But as some of you may have read Professor Richard Susskind's book on Tomorrow's Lawyers, a new edition that's come out, and you'll see that he goes on and talking about what clients want. As they say, clients want less for more, and they want the end product. They don't really care about how it's done as long as it's done legitimately. And I think our duty as lawyers is to make sure it is done legitimately. Has it been done ethically, properly, or has there been hallucinations being put into it? Has there been bias incorporated into that kind of system? Those sort of things are the things that we would be having to look at.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We've covered so much about why AI is relevant, will impact the legal industry, and why it's in our interest as, professionals within the legal industry to keep up with it. But for those of us who maybe don't feel like we're quite where we need to be, or we haven't even started sort of getting familiar with AI and technologies around it, what is the best way to get started? How do you begin to, as a non-tech lawyer person, so to speak, how do you begin to sort of familiarize yourself with AI and technology? I'm going to come first to you, Alice, on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the first steps, because the proliferation of AI tools is so great, and the legal tech market can be a bit like the Wild West. So I would say that you first need to do an audit of your job and your practice area and look at what data-centric or data-heavy tasks come up in your day-to-day life. And basically, how are you interacting with client data, third-party data, and is that process painful? If it's painful, then there's probably a solution out there that you might not be aware of, or might be aware of but unfamiliar with at that point. But I think that first step's really important. Looking at due diligence exercises within M&A or e-discovery within disputes, they are completely different. Whilst powered by the same AI, you're going to be using different tools. So the second is then to go and find experts in those areas. And you've obviously got vendors, outsourced professionals like myself who are working in the legal tech area. And we will always be happy to be sounding boards. Our first and foremost point of view is to educate what technology is out there. Dare I say, in order to find experts, you can be using AI like ChatGPT. You can enter a prompt like, how do I respond to a data subject access request using technology? And that will at least point you in the first direction, much like you would use Google, but get a different response and get comfortable in that process. And then also education-wise, universities, law firms, they're doing way more now when it comes to training around technology. I've spoken at Queen Mary University London about technology and arbitration, but again, I'd get really specific into your practice area, because this is where it starts to get really overwhelming. If you continue, I think this has been an excellent introduction and 101 to AI in the legal sector, but your next step is to get specific to the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis, or you're just going to get overwhelmed.
Thank you so much, Alice. That's super helpful. So broad knowledge to begin with, but then work out how it connects to where you are, and
I think so.
Use that as a next step. Excellent, thank you. I'm going to come to you, Beverly, on this one as well.
Okay. Okay, I sound like I guess I'm acting as a sounding board. But again, I do like the point Alice made about how universities, institutions need to be, they need a revamp, to be honest. That's something that I think is a global problem. Globally, our curriculums are probably outdated by a couple of decades. They're not really factoring technology. It's not really keeping up with the pace at which technology is changing, because the reality is lawyers of today work very differently even from 5 years ago. So again, this is really about embracing the best bits about what AI has to offer, bearing in mind the principles and ethics that we need to abide by. And again, it's about the way our clients work. Clients are changing. You know, we need to adapt to our clients. We've already spoken about this in detail. What do clients expect from us? I mean, there's some fantastic tools out there that you can use even for client management, for contracts. I guess that might be a little controversial because, you know, I've heard some stories about even clients going on ChatGPT to generate contracts, which I really do not advocate at all. But the reality is, efficiency, they want speed. So if lawyers can embrace AI and these tools, it will certainly enhance their output. And that's what clients want. Clients can be a little bit, I want it now, I want it now. And if you are unable to keep up, say, with your counterparts who are able to put things out maybe in a quicker turnaround, then you will find yourself lagging behind. So it feels like as technology deepens and evolves, that productivity demand, the burden is kind of on us as lawyers. It's definitely, I feel it. I definitely do feel it. So again, I would say that AI does have, I would say that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages for now, but let's see, it's evolving. I mean, I've heard that there's another app called Claude 2. Don't know if anybody here has heard of it. And for now, it's restricted to the US and the UK. And it's got far better responses. It can interpret much longer data sequences, etc. So, you know, it really makes us think, okay, how do we combat anti-plagiarism? Those are other issues I know institutions are facing as well. But the exciting thing is, for every problem, there's an opportunity. So again, it just keeps us lawyers busy, because we are working on both sides. We're working on the side of the opportunity, side of the challenges. So again, it's about having an open mind and upskilling. Extremely important to be abreast of what's out there, what tools are available, so you're not completely in the dark.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Beverly. This is such an important question, and I'm sure will be so relevant for many of the people in the audience. And despite the fact that I want to get question and answers, which we will in a bit, we've got some questions come through, I'd love to hear also from you, Ngozi and Chobna, on that particular question. How do we get started for those who don't know how to engage with this at all? And for those that got started but a little bit stuck, how do we move forward in terms of engaging with this new technology, so to speak? You know, any additional points you want to add to what's been said already?
Right. I think Alice has hit the nail on the head. First of all, look at your practice area, because you can be very specific. There are lots happening with regard to universities that you can actually go and learn from. There's a lot. I mean, here at King's College London, we have the our Artificial Intelligence Institute now, believe it or not. But there is lots of other in each kind of sector. You will find that there will be talks now on this area, because if it's impacting that area, it will be. I mean, and a lot of the technology are being used, are being created specifically for particular areas, etc. So we have I think people might have heard about Harvey, for example. That's been a tool that's rolled out by Allen and Overy. It apparently uses ChatGPT-4 to help lawyers automate contract analysis, due diligence, contract research, and generate insights and recommendations and predictions across multiple practice areas. So you can see how it's evolving. And if you find that your clients are using those, or what, they will expect it, because they all want to have efficiency for the future. And but they want to, you know, they don't like the idea of, okay, for you to do those painful tasks, because as Alice says, they're painful tasks. If they're painful, they must be repetitive. They're not using your creativity, and you want some kind of assistance on that. I mean, you would have heard about Case Cruncher. That was an experiment that was done, quite a few years ago, I think prior to COVID, where they got over 100 lawyers competing with this algorithm to find out. And that was very specific on PPE claims with regard to what the financial ombudsman would come out for those outcomes. But it found out that the algorithm did a better job. It was much more quicker, and it did a much more better job in terms of accuracy on prediction than the lawyers did. How is that going to really impact us? We have to keep a line on how it's going to impact us. I mean, would you instruct a barrister if you knew very well that the likelihood of your case being, your application being granted would be 20% as opposed to 80%, or when you find out it's in front of a particular judge? You might still want to go ahead. But it's things like this that people are using, these kind of algorithms and predictive kind of analysis, to try and find out, and how that's going to actually impact in the long run. So I do believe that as this technology does evolve, we will be using it a lot more. We'll be able to get rid of all those kind of painful tasks as it is, and really try and use our real genuine skill as a lawyer, finding out what those novel things, correcting kind of hallucinations that might be coming into the network, and finding out, what real creativity is.
Thank you so much for that, Shabna. I'm just going to come straight to you now, Ngozi, as well. How do we get started? How do we get going?
I think that my co-panelists have really answered the question. I'll just add the fact that, for those who consider themselves to have had no exposure to artificial intelligence computers, one way you can begin to ramp up is to explore legal research tools. Many of the legal research tools you have today are run by artificial intelligence. And even though the name sounds very high, it's kind of high sounding to say artificial intelligence. Actually, we are all in touch with these things, right? If you start with even exploring the features you have on your phone, unfortunately, I find that people use less than 5% of the capacities that their phones present. And now we're talking about artificial intelligence. So let's get started with the simple things. Use the technologies you have to make life easier for you. When you come into the legal space, legal research tools help you to analyze details, help you to find out case laws. Of course, it's been said over and over, the panelists have made the point that you don't suspend your legal training. It's an enabler. So you approach these tools with that mindset, and you begin to love the output you get. You begin to love the fact that it's making you more efficient and making you look good. And that gives you more confidence to explore more. And of course, for all of us, we would get to a point where we would say, oh, I have this level of trust, maybe. Again, there are issues around trust, right? I asked someone yesterday, would you trust a machine to do certain things for you? I think it will come with time. It will come with trust is earned, right? Today, if you fly an aircraft, or if you fly in an aircraft, very likely there are times in that journey that everything is automatically run, right? And the aviation industry has had to do a lot of iterations to get to that point. So we would continue to test these machines, continue to test the outputs. But for now, let's get familiar with it. Let's still put on our usual due diligence, but it does help us a lot in many ways to get ahead of the game.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we've had a number of questions come in. I'm going to read out some of the questions, and in a sense, I suppose, allocate them to panelists so that you're thinking about them before I come to you. And hopefully we can sort of try to cover these in about a minute or so each, if that's okay. Right, so one of the questions is AI's impact on legal practice as big a deal as, say, the advent of other technology, the internet, so the advent of the personal computer, the internet and email, and the lessons we can draw from those tech eras? Any guesses what the next tech disruption might be? I think this one's going to be for Alice, if you don't mind. Can you please speak to issues of plagiarism with the use of ChatGPT and other generative AI tools? I'm going to come to Shabna on that. I know some of these things we may have covered already, maybe prior to the questions coming in. So please do feel free to, just speak to them quickly or refer back to previous answers. have you ever had to clean up any negative consequences of a client's attempt to use AI in their legal dealings? I'm going to come to you, Beverly, on that, if you don't mind. Right. 1 second. Do you fear that AI will support certain areas of law more than others? Do you think that this will lead to unequal access to justice for groups in less media-friendly or profitable areas of law? I'm going to come to you, Ngozi, on this. So I will get started with you, Alice, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Right, so 1 minute to answer this. I think that the impact of AI on the legal practice is going to be bigger than anything that we've seen to date. And I think the advances that are going to come in 1 year and 2 years are going to be bigger than those that we're seeing now. Because essentially we're on a path of exponential growth when it comes to technology. We don't necessarily know where technology is going to go, but looking in a crystal ball, my prediction along Shabana's lines is that are you going to be bringing a claim if on the facts of your claim you already know your chances of success? Because right now we're in a tipping point of good data in, good data out. We now know we should be tracking how judges decide on certain issues of fact. We know we should be tracking arbitrators and counsel. So when a savvy client has all of this information to hand, I think it's going to change the way that disputes, I'm talking about disputes in particular because this is my area, but that disputes could be run. Now that is way down the looking glass, and that is completely my prediction. But yes, the impacts of AI right now is just going to be unparalleled. And I think we need to be embracing these issues, and we really need to be ahead of what's to come.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alice. I'm going to come next to you, Beverly.
Okay, great. So I remember the question was about, have I ever had to clean up or tidy up the effects of a client using AI? Okay, let me give you a basic example, really basic. Cut and paste. When pre-AI, clients would do a search on Google and look up, say, a contract for services or something. One of the funny things you tend to see with things like that is they obviously aren't legally trained, so they don't take into account the seat. They don't take into account the nuances of the industry. So it becomes pretty obvious when clients do things like cutting and pasting or using AI as it were. So I mean, I always educate my clients. I always say this. I know it seems tempting to want to cut out the costs and cut and paste or run on AI, but you still need that legal expertise. You still need your counsel to kind of walk by you, hold your hand, explain, how the law in this particular jurisdiction affects your business in this particular jurisdiction. So there's no shortcuts, unfortunately. There's no shortcuts. It's really best to seek advice of a competent, experienced lawyer that has the subject matter expertise that you need. Of course, don't get me wrong, not saying that lawyers with the expertise don't do their research. Of course we do, but you always have to tweak and adjust and make it bespoke for what you need it for, make it fit for purpose. So yes, you would always find them out. It's a bit easy. It's easy to spot. So for people listening, always advise your clients to engage an expert rather than try and do it themselves, or they will get burnt. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Beverly. I'm going to come to you now, Shabana.
All right. With regard to plagiarism, well, as I mentioned, it just does it on predictability. And of course, with regard to plagiarism, would you be able to detect it? Now, you can use certain technology to try and find out whether somebody has used ChatGPT on a particular stuff, etc. But you will know about, I'm sure most of you probably heard about the cases of Getty taking about because of all the scraping that the Stability AI unlawfully has scraped a lot of millions of images from its sites. So it's taking, Getty Images have taken an action. Also, of course, you probably heard about Sarah Silverman and the group of class claims that are taking place with regard to OpenAI, with regard to ChatGPT, etc., about use of their copyright infringement, etc. So we've got a lot of these cases going on in the work. So watch out for what's going to happen in that kind of area. But I think more important, as I mentioned, is the data that where is this information coming from? It's coming from the internet to a certain degree, but what about the information that you're putting on there? And about where you're getting that information from? Because I think another thing you really had to take into consideration, and I just put some spots into this, it's regarding data protection. And we know very well that the Italian Data Protection Authority actually suspended and put a ban on OpenAI's ChatGPT service previously. I think they opened it up subsequently on certain safeguards being put in place. But a couple of the grounds for the ban included that it did not appear to have any kind of legal basis for the collection and processing of personal data to train the large language model, that inaccurate personal data was being processed, and that no information was provided to users whose personal data was collected and processed by OpenAI. Because remember, personal data can be anything that identifies a person, and you'll find lots of information about yourself on the internet. So there's a lot of things that is being done. And of course, the other one about protecting, the other issue was about not having sufficient safeguards for children or users under 13, although they say on their garden that you should be at least age 13, etc., before you apply. So we've seen all these kind of concerns that have come up. So there are things to keep an eye out of on that. I know France and Spain are currently investigating OpenAI's processing of data as well. So there's a lot of compliance issues that as lawyers, we need to be aware of, because it follows on from what we can actually provide to our clients as well.
Thanks so much, Shabna. I'm going to come to you quickly as well, Ngozi, on the final question I allocated.
Just to be sure, you wanted to respond to add to what
Yes,
Shabna has said?
So to respond to that question, do you fear that AI
my question.
will... Yes.
Okay, so the question really is around whether there is a fear that AI would focus on certain areas of law and then result in unequal access to justice for groups that are in less media focused areas. I don't have that fear personally. I think like everything in life, growth, when a new thing comes on board, it comes in stages and it doesn't swallow the entire industry at the same time. So you might not have the same impact across all areas of law at the same time. This is gradual, but it is surely happening. What I find that is driving the increased interest or increased focus on development legal tech is that lawyers themselves have become more interested in embracing artificial intelligence. Remember that no one understands the legal industry like the lawyers do. So the question is, are there lawyers in these less what the audience asked, described as less friendly, media friendly aspects of law? Are there lawyers there? Do they have any interest in embracing artificial intelligence and exploring the uses of artificial intelligence in those areas? Once you can answer yes to that question, it is inevitable that indeed artificial intelligence will begin to influence how law is practiced in those sectors. I would also say that when it comes to the development of technology generally, you would always have to rely on the need, right? So once there is a need, you get creative about how you resolve that need. ChatGPT, for example, there has been a number of software that have been built off the backbone of the ChatGPT technology. And that just shows that you can take one artificial intelligence system and adopt it to different scenarios depending on what needs to be dealt with in that scenario. So we all have to be creative in how we consider artificial intelligence. But ultimately, I can assure you that this is like water. It will find its level. It will cover all the areas that needs to be covered. And it doesn't matter whether we consider it to be a fancy area of law or not. There would be uses for artificial intelligence, and in time we will get there.
Thank you so much, Ngozi. And on that note, I mean, this is such a fascinating topic, and I just want to thank you so much as panelists for walking us through it, for helping us engage with it in a much more accessible way. We are out of time. It was always ambitious to try to cover such an interesting and in-depth topic in a webinar, but I think you did an excellent job. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience who attended. Thank you for the vast majority of people who've basically stayed on with us, even a little bit past our allotted time. We are very appreciative of you all from BNLF. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.